Thank you so much. See, I can press that OK button. Hi, everybody. My name is Godfrey Plata. My pronouns are he, him, his. I get to be the Deputy Director at LA Forward Institute. If you go on to the next slide, Jason, we are a nonprofit organization that is supporting folks to activate in their local democracies. And we do that by ensuring that folks have more access to learning about what's happening in their local government, policies that are being passed, really amplify what is happening so that people can awaken to their own power, as you see on the screen. And oftentimes that's in solidarity with communities most impacted by injustice. And so everything we're talking about today is about a specific issue that has come up as LA Forward Institute community members have come together through the years, have had conversations to build community, talk about the challenges they're facing in their neighborhoods, and we organically as an organization follow their lead and support them to get engaged in the local in their local government. So today is built on that particular premise. And go ahead and go on to the next slide, Jason. Today you're here because as we've marketed, we want to save unarmed models of crisis response, or UMCR, for LA City. And UMCR, as you will hear during this Zoom, is a form of unarmed crisis response. And so we want to be very clear about unarmed crisis response and what we mean by that. And we've had volunteers over the last 2 years working on this particular issue and ensuring that we have a very focused container for what we are actually trying to solve for. From our community gatherings in 2023, we had community members talk about wanting someone to call if they were wanting some sort of emergency help, but someone who was unarmed, someone that was likely not an armed police officer. Who can residents call for unarmed crisis response? It was a question that folks were wanting for folks who are experiencing mental health, either on the streets or housed. Right, mental health issues impact all of our families, regardless of our shelter. And so we wanted to create a working group that was really obsessed with the question, who can residents call? Who are you going to call when you are experiencing or witnessing immediate crisis? What services or people are deployed as a result of that call? And then what is the quality of that unarmed person or service that gets sent and deployed for that particular type of emergency or incident when called? So these are the 3 guiding principles of the group. And today we're going to be uplifting one particular solution that LA City has started to invest in, that we want LA City to continue investing in, called Unarmed Model of Crisis Response, or UMCR. So in a moment, I'm going to pass things on to one of our volunteers, Paxelli. Before we do that, I want to just shout out that everything you are seeing tonight is the work of many volunteers who meet Mondays at 7 p.m. and have obsessed over the last 2 years over the 3 principles that you see on your screen. We would not be doing the work that we were doing were it not something that was uplifted by community and is continued to be acted on by community. All of the information you're going to see tonight is because community members have volunteered their time toward triangulating information from all of these different offices that you're going to hear about, as well as council offices, mayoral offices, county, federal, state officials. They have met with dozens and dozens and dozens of officials to be able to bring you tonight an opportunity that we can act on that furthers the world that we want to live in. And so shout out to all those volunteers who you're going to meet. And also shout out to our comms lead, C, who has also helped to create some of the materials you're seeing tonight. I'm going to pass things on to our first volunteer, Paxelli, to share what else you're going to be hearing tonight. And you'll see me again soon to learn more about the programs that we're trying to save. Paxelli.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Godfrey. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paxelli Marquez. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of LA Forward Institute's Unarmed Crisis Response Working Group. Before we begin, I just want to very quickly shout out Godfrey and the whole LA Forward team for all of their support in helping us develop the work that we're doing right now. And at the same time, my fellow working group members as well, too. There's a few of us who will be presenting today, but we are just a small snapshot of the entire group, and we've all been doing different pieces of the work. And so this is really a summary of everything that we've been doing at this moment, and we look to continuing our work as well. So today's teaching is going to focus on first why UMCR and its potential scenarios at the moment. Then we'll give all of you a bit of a crash course of what the program actually is, and of course what the values are of the program specifically, and taking action right now to save UMCR. So that will lead us to our next piece, which is our advocacy plan, to kind of go over what we're planning on doing and how you can get involved in doing that as well too, and specific strategic items you can take as well today. And lastly, we'll wrap up with how you can stay involved. So not just with today's campaign, but also just moving forward and implementing this work throughout LA City. And then we're also going to discuss questions. So during the presentation, you're more than welcome to add your questions in the chat box. If you do want to submit any questions anonymously, you're more than welcome to send it to my colleague, Christy, who is also another working group member. You can just direct message them to her. And so then that way, at the end of the presentation, we'll go over the questions. And that way we can respond to those questions that folks want to remain anonymous on. And of course, lastly, we'll conclude and discuss next steps. So next slide. So why UMCR? So UMCR are the 4 S's. So first and foremost, it saves lives. So in March 2024, LA City's Unarmed model of crisis response, aka UMCR, pilot program was launched to divert six types of nonviolent 911 calls to unarmed mental health responders instead of traditional police. So some of these call types, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail later in the presentation, include mental health, suicidal threats, substance abuse, and wellness checks. And depending on one of the 3 participating service providers in the program, the responding teams are typically composed of a licensed mental health specialist, community worker, and/or case manager. And in general, the program has an average response time of 20 minutes. And of course, as it's noted on the slide, it is 100% unarmed, meaning that LAPD does not accompany these teams out to these 6 nonviolent call types. Secondly, it saves money. So it's a low investment, meaning that UMCR funding makes up less than 0.1% of LA City's $12.8 billion budget. And in terms of a high reward specifically, it is a cost-saving investment, especially during a tough budget cycle. So for example, police liability payouts in fiscal year 2022-2023 were $31,521,664. And to fund UMCR, it only costs $12 million. So we'll get into the specifics in a little bit. And of course, the final S is saving UMCR because of the value that it brings to LA City. Next slide. So to give all of you an example, in UMCR's most recent newsletter for February 2025, there was a quote added for one of the participants. So this participant said, "If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. I was convinced that it was the end, but something about the way you spoke to me, the way you didn't give up on me, made me decide to give it one more chance." Which is one of the reasons why, and this really illustrates why we're here trying to save this specific program. Next slide. And right now, it's potential scenarios. So there's a couple of different scenarios that we're at the moment. So the first one is UMCR continues and is funded as is for the 2025-2026 budget cycle. So of course, in an ideal world, we would want for this program to be citywide. But right now, of course, we're focusing because of the tough budget coming up. We are focusing on maintaining the existing program. So specifically what that means is for UMCR to receive its minimum of $12 million to continue at its current capacity for the upcoming 2025-2026 budget cycle. For it to also meet its 5-year pilot program timeline commitment, because the program is intended to be a 5-year program. And lastly, for the funding to be noted as a line item in the city's 2025-2026 budget, which we'll get into in a little bit. Secondly, the potential scenarios right now being discussed are a merger between UMCR and a second program called Circle. We'll discuss Circle in more detail later on in the presentation, but some of the differences between UMCR and Circle, for example, are that unlike Circle, UMCR can respond to calls related to both people experiencing homelessness and people who are housed. And so, like I said, we'll get into that in a little bit. And lastly, the third potential scenario at the moment is UMCR being discontinued. So of course, due to the $1 billion city budget gap, there is a real possibility that UMCR could be eliminated. If UMCR is discontinued, this means all 6 call types covered within the program would most likely be redirected back to LAPD, including calls related to mental health. So especially the fact that this program exists at the moment, we want to maintain this infrastructure in place because it's already proven to be successful in different areas of the city's needs. Next slide. And so we quickly want to just introduce what some of the action items you can take after this presentation. We'll go into more detail later, but we wanted to at least introduce it early on in the presentation. So some of the action items that you can take within this campaign is first, sending a one-click email to the mayor, CAO, and LA City Council committees that need to hear from you. Because as we're going to discuss in more detail, it's vital for these offices to hear from us as community members that either we live in the city or have family members that live in the city, such as in my case, the value that this program brings and has been bringing to our communities in the existing districts that it's been working in. The second is to show up for public comment this upcoming Friday, March 28th at Van Nuys City Hall. So the ad hoc committee on community safety is going to host their first meeting, and it will be at the Van Nuys office, Van Nuys location. And so we're hoping for folks to show up and submit public comments, and we'll provide all the details regarding talking points and things like that to support all of you to be able to show up for that day. And then lastly, we have an action toolkit, which you can easily access through the link right there and also the QR code above. Thanks. And then I will pass it back over to Godfrey.
Thanks so much, Paxelli. And we can again, really, if we could go back to actually the slide that Paxelli was just on, what Paxelli just presented to you was the TLDR. You can only join us for the first 10 minutes of this call or first 15 minutes of this call. This is where we want to leave you, right? We have more because we want you to know about this program. We want you to know why we think it's at risk. We want you to know what you can do with more specificity and why we think that these are strategic and targeted actions. But if you know you need to hop, there's something on the stove, this is where you need to go right now to start taking action. And you can start sending emails right now on this call. You can start reposting graphics on the internet while you listen, all of that. So thank you so much, Paxelli, for introducing sort of the first package of actions that folks can take. All right, let's go to the next slide. Thanks so much, Jason and Paxelli. So let's dive deeper because you've heard Paxelli by now talk about UMCR, Unarmed Model of Crisis Response, being just one version of an unarmed crisis response program. So we just want to make sure folks know that there's actually a variety of different unarmed crisis response programs that already exist in LA City or LA County. And we are backing a specific one that we think needs to receive funding from the city because we think it's doing what we want it to do and meets our principles that we talked about earlier in the call. So if we made a full list of every single possibility of unarmed crisis response, there are grassroots community networks. Many of us, I'm an immigrant, there are rapid response networks right now operating throughout the city. Some of them have been organized by neighbors. And so that is a form of unarmed crisis response in moments of emergency. In addition to UMCR, Paxelli mentioned there's another program called Circle that lives directly under the office of the mayor. And so we'll talk about the differences between UMCR and Circle in a moment and why we're in particular trying to uplift UMCR. We also know that 988 has actually been passed federally and the county has led it into implementation. 988 is a phone number you can call if you didn't know that. And it can offer some sort of self-crisis intervention type of work. We know there are other types of crisis intervention teams, including ones run by LA County. And then Metro System is neither county nor city. The Metro System is its own jurisdiction and has its own burgeoning ambassadors program to support ridership as well without needing to be armed police. And then there's lots of state and federal levers that we've investigated as well that help to support the funding or implementation of these various things, but just want to make sure that folks know we're focusing on UMCR, but clearly there's a variety of different opportunities here to investigate as you think about what unarmed crisis response looks like. Go ahead into the next slide. Again, here are the numbers that currently exist, and there's probably more. None of these are rapid response numbers for immigration, as I just mentioned in the previous slide. So this graphic is actually distributed by the county. And these are numbers that the LA County wants us to know if we want help of some sort. I think I myself, having grown up here after my family moved here from the Philippines, learned the number 911 pretty quickly. And that's been the one most marked in my head. And that's probably the one that I would mention first of all of these different numbers, because that's been programmed into me. However, there's all these other numbers, and our argument at LA Forward Institute, based on conversations our community members have had, is we need to make this simpler. At the end of the day, there's just a single number that we could call and we can get unarmed crisis response from, and it's the one that I call in terms of emergencies. Right now, we have to know all of these different numbers, and we have to sort ourselves through these different types of emergency management systems. And actually, if you call 911, even the unarmed crisis response services we're about to talk about, 911 operators have to know about like the different types of services that are available, and they have to transfer you and manually get you there. There's not a one button, one call system right now, and we're trying to get to that future. So today is just a step moving toward that future that we really want to make sure we get to here in LA City. The next slide, please. And on this next slide, as you can see, we start to zoom in on the UMCR program itself. So again, over and over, you're going to hear us say, and we're going to want you to say when you say this publicly, UMCR stands for Unarmed Models of Crisis Response. New acronym. We know we don't like acronyms, but there we go. UMCR is the name of the program. It lives under another acronym, the CAO's office, the City Administrative Office at the City of LA right now. And one of the reasons why we like it is its exact function. It diverts 6 types of calls from 911 that would usually go to LAPD. It's not co-response. There are programs out there that say, well, let's send a trained clinician alongside PD. We don't want armed PD there at all. We're looking for unarmed response. And so it's intended to be completely unarmed and to actually share a service to those to whom the service is dispatched to. Right now, it's only established and serving about 28% of residents in the city of Los Angeles in 6 out of 21 police divisions. It actually only started in 3 last March, and it was going so well, and the folks who are running it found that there was actually enough capacity from the service providers to expand to 6 out of 21 police divisions more immediately. So last September, not even halfway through the pilot, they decided that it could be worth expanding to 6 out of 21 police divisions. It's located under police divisions because it literally has to reroute the phone call to a completely different service. That is the only connection that it has to PD in that way. And right now, as you can imagine, this is a type of service, a type of diversion instinct that we really want built out for the entirety of the city. And so these 6 out of 21 police divisions operating this pilot right now are offering us some learnings, a possible template, maybe suggesting a possible framework as we expand this citywide, which there is currently no plan to yet. And of course, we want that to be true. Right now, this is the way the program currently exists. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And on this next slide, you see a few more details. These are the types of calls that are currently routed to UMCR in the 6 police divisions in which it exists. So usually calls 1 through 6, if you called 911 and UMCR didn't exist, it would go to PD. That's what would happen. Sometimes fire gets some of the mental health calls, but we don't think that armed response is necessary and perhaps even dangerous for some of these phone calls. And there are many more call types than this. In fact, the LAPPL, the LA Police Protective League, they are the union that organizes police officers. They had released statements just after George Floyd had happened a couple of years ago, the racial uprisings happened, that also said, they don't believe that officers have the training to be able to attend to these things either. And so literally these diversion programs create an entirely new way of thinking about emergency response without weapons there at all. It is 24/7, which is really exciting. And like the folks who show up on the door are trained, are licensed either as behavioral health specialists, therapists, crisis interventionists, community workers, et cetera. Go to the next slide, please. On this next slide, you'll start to see a map of where this program is. Again, it's only in 6 out of 21 police divisions. We didn't know until we started doing this organizing work how many police divisions there even were. right? Like we were regular everyday people who were interested in figuring out a new system for us to provide alternative unarmed services. And so we learned that along the way. And so the map that you see on your screen in yellow and orange are the police divisions that currently reroute those 6 types of phone calls to a completely different unarmed service altogether. And so you can see the names of those police divisions, which you might recognize if you live in those areas. They are Southeast, Devonshire, and Wiltshire. They've had the program for the entirety of the year from March 2024 to March 2025. And then expanded from there were Olympic, West LA, and West Valley. Started to receive services once service providers were clear that they could actually also cover more space and more geography. And that was again in about September. And so right now, these 6 districts make up about 28% service area of residents and receive this particular service. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The program itself has released a newsletter, and this is how you can find out more about what is going on with the pilot, what services are being rendered, what stats are being produced by this. It is a learning pilot, but it's a real service, right? People are benefiting from this right now. And so it's really exciting that this is as of the February newsletter. And so like this isn't even up until today, right? As of February, 6,000 calls were diverted from LAPD. And what's great about this as well is that the folks who, again, are deployed are people who can actually provide a service that meets the need that is being called about. And so you can see more than 8,000 services have actually been provided as a result of these calls, as opposed to an armed response that would have shown up in any other world. And they're tracking where they're able to complete every service without any sort of aid from PD, because that's the intent of this program. And they were able to actually deploy 96% of services without needing any sort of PD support at all. Because again, that is where we want this. We want there to be alternative services to armed police. And then you can see sort of the response time underneath. What's really exciting here is that 28-minute time that was hyped up earlier. A 28-minute average response time, of course, could be quicker. I want someone here now if I have an emergency. And what's really interesting here is as we've worked to understand the county's current mental health services and their deployment, they started at a 6-hour response time, and they knew they needed to hire up and expand their programming quick. So now the county's mental health services are able to have a 2-hour response time on average. 2 hours is a lot. They're working to take that down to 1 hour, right? This program, where it exists, average response time, 28 minutes, right? So this is a much stronger and faster response. And as a result of these services being able to be implemented in the areas where they're implemented, they're able to actually take that load off of county DMH so that county DMH can work on decreasing their response time from 2 hours instead of increasing it if we got rid of these programs. And so we want to make sure that we're serving both the county at large as well as the proximate geographies that this service serves, so that we're able to expand these types of responses across the entire county. Go ahead, next slide. We want to compare this to a program called Circle, which has received a little bit more shine, we would say. It lives under the office of the mayor right now at LA City. And so we want people to know about the differences between UMCR and Circle. One of the things that is true about Circle is that it is an unarmed crisis response, and it is a response to incidents reported to 911 or Circle directly that involve neighbors who are unhoused. And so these are non-violent, non-medically severe incidents that involve folks who are unhoused that the Circle team deploys to. Differently, they do not provide a service. They attend to an incident and are there as an unarmed response, which we think is good, that it's not an unarmed response, because those are the types of things that we want to be true in the world. But there is no direct service delivered right away. There is a proactive and preventative relational outreach component that Circle provides to try to get to know folks who might be unhoused in any particular area, so that if Circle is deployed in a crisis, that there might be a relationship there. So that's strong. And we want to make sure that if things are happening that demand an emergency response, that there's something that addresses the emergency response. And right now, Circle would have to be responsible to bridge to services, and it would be great if the services just turned up as the initial deployment. They're not as equipped for warm handoffs to those services. We have found that city council offices that have Circle within their districts often benefit from having stronger relationships with the Circle teams in their districts to make them even more effective. But left to their own devices, it is a service that, again, shows up as an unarmed response, but is not yet a service in and of itself. It's also a little bit more visible because city council offices do build relationships with the Circle teams in their office. Council offices tend to know more about it and know less about UMCR. UMCR likes to say that they don't demand additional capacity from council offices. Council offices have a lot to do, have a lot of other services to deliver. And so they like to say that UMCR, as a package of services that attends to 6 call types that would normally go to police, that those services can be sustained without that sort of council intervention, which again saves capacity overall. The other thing to note here is that Circle gets its own line item on a budget for the past few years. Because it lives under the mayor's office, the mayor can draft a budget that says, hey, Circle, here's $8 million to provide your services for the next year. Meanwhile, UMCR, because it's a pilot program and does not live under the mayor's office, had to draw money from something called an unappropriated balance. An unappropriated balance is literally what it sounds like. Here's a bunch of money, it's not appropriated. If you want it, you have to ask for it. And so UMCR had to ask for it in order to be funded for this year through August 31st. However, that money is no longer there. They used it. And we're in a budget crisis, which means there's absolutely no money there. If we want UMCR to continue its funding, it's going to have to be funded intentionally. Circle historically has been funded intentionally. UMCR has not intentionally been funded, and that is one thing that we really want to amplify this year and why we're also lifting up. UMCR is a program that we think deserves your attention and our advocacy. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass things to my colleague, Danielle.
Hi, everyone. Danielle Williams, she, her pronouns. I live in Beverly Grove, CD5. I'm also, like Paxili, like Jason, you'll hear from in a bit, a member of the LA Forward Unarmed Crisis Response Working Group. And so I just want to talk about why we need to take action right now. And again, uplift some of these things that Godfrey and Paxili have already talked about, but that we really want you guys to internalize, especially if you're hopefully going to take action in a variety of ways. So again, one of the big value adds of the Unarmed Models of Crisis Response program is that licensed clinicians respond to mental health crises. I think this, at least for me, when I was first learning about this and I learned about UMCR and Circle that Godfrey was just comparing, the two, I was like, oh, they're the same, just Circle really focuses on unhoused people and UMCR was like, no, this is not true. Circle does not have a mental health component. That is just UMCR. And again, UMCR, that makes sense because Circle is not responding to mental health crises. UNCR is responding to mental health crises. And UMCR responds to calls involving both the housed and the unhoused. Again, Circle only responds to calls involving unhoused individuals. And again, they're not focusing on mental health crises. Another thing, SMART, which is it's a co-response model that's housed within LAPD. Unlike SMART, UMCR is, again, it's 100% unarmed, and this is really important. It cannot place individuals on a 5150 hold. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, a 5150 hold is basically an involuntary hold, 72 hours to a commitment to an institution. This is something that frequently prevents people suffering from mental health issues, from even their families, from reaching out and seeking help because they are so concerned that they might be committed. If the LAPD shows up, even this SMART unit within the LAPD that does have a mental health component, but again, you're also getting an armed officer. If they show up, then they can place you. They can involuntarily commit you. UMCR cannot do that. And so that is one of the major differences that we really want to uplift and how that adds value to our community. Next slide, please. So again, it reduces the burden on other city and county services. Not only does it divert calls from the LAPD, but it diverts calls that otherwise the county would have had to attend to, because historically the county is the entity that deals with these mental health crises. So it's actually increasing the county's capacity to deal with this in other areas. Also, it's really important that, the 6,000 we talked about earlier, there was the slide, the 6,000 calls that UMCR has dealt with in the past year. Most of those, it was just with 3 divisions for until about the fall. So it's a huge number of calls that they've been able to address just again with I think it covers about 28% at this point. And that wasn't even for the full year. It was only operating in 3 of the 6 police divisions. And again, really uplifting that because it's more localized in the city, it has a shorter response time than the county. It's 28 minutes. UMCR has an average response time of 28 minutes versus the county's 2 hours. And that is, we're not trying to shade the county here. Actually, I recently learned in terms of total square miles, LA County is like Delaware and 2 Rhode Islands put together. So this is no, shade on the county, but again, noting, I think Godfrey noted earlier, or maybe it was Paxilli, that originally it was 6 hours. So they've been able to get it down to 2. And now and with UMCR, it's on average 28 minutes. So we love that. That's also, I think, assisting them in their capacity. Next slide, please. And of course, one of the biggest things is that UMCR saves lives. We know and there was an article published by a local news organization in 2021. They used data from the California Department of Justice, and they found that between 2016 and 2019, and this was statewide, more than half of serious use of force incidents, so that's injury, death, or use of a firearm, those incidents involve civilians with some sort of impairment. So that includes mental health, substances, and just being described as erratic. So we know that this is a big issue within police. And then specifically within LA City, we know we have 2 cases. Takar Smith was killed by LAPD when he was experiencing a mental health episode. His wife had asked for police assistance and specifically described him as having a schizophrenic episode. So these were things that were made very explicit in the 911 call. His family received a settlement of $6 million. And we also know that in just last week, the city council approved another settlement of $8 million that occurred based on an incident that occurred a few years ago, where a man, when his sister called to report that he was having, Margarita Lopez, he was reported as having a mental health episode, potentially being suicidal. He was also shot and killed by the LAPD. Again, these are both instances where police were contacted. They were specifically told they were being asked for help for a family member who was experiencing a mental crisis episode, and both of these individuals ended up dead. And from the city, we're told that this is an awful year for the city budget. This is $14 million for 2 cases, and the program, the ask for UMCR to keep it going for another year is $12 million. So again, does the city want to continue to pay out settlements instead of focusing on saving lives? Because you could save lives. So we don't think that's okay. We want to focus on proactively saving people's lives and save money in terms of the settlements and save lives. And then next slide, please. Yes, why take action right now? So in addition to budget constraints, which we've heard about, you and the value added that we talked about. So again, there are 5 things. When you're looking at if it's 100% unarmed, it uses teams consisting of licensed and or credentialed clinicians. It can't 50-51 people. It works with both housed and unhoused people, and it responds in less than 30 minutes. The only program that does all 5 of those things is UMCR. So, but the problem, even though it does all of these wonderful things, is, again, as Godfrey mentioned, it's more invisible than its counterparts. What happens currently, if you call 911 to report someone having a mental health crisis, to report yourself having a mental health crisis, if you live in one of the areas covered by those 6 police divisions, then UMCR is sent out to you. But if, for instance, you're a business owner and you're having, you're upset about an unhoused person, you can just pick up the phone and call your council member, and then your council member can actually call Circle. So there's a lot more if Circle is in that council member's district. So the council members that have Circle in their district have the ability to interface with it in a way that they don't with UMCR. Again, we think this is by design, right? It doesn't require additional work, but it means that council members, especially council members that don't have UMCR in their districts already, they just don't know as much about it, and they're not as, they like the fact that they can pick up council members that have the Circle in their district. They can pick up and call a number and someone will go out. That makes them seem responsive. We understand that. But again, this is by design, that this pilot doesn't require additional work. So we really want to make sure that we're uplifting the work that UMCR does to keep it in the city budget and hopefully get that separate line item so they can keep doing the good work. And I think it's next slide, and I think it's Jason.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Enright, and I've been doing work with this program for over 2 years now. And if I can just take a moment, I'd like to share something a little personal. We saw those stories of the settlements where family members called to get help for their loved ones. And because the only available service was the police, something escalated and went wrong and someone lost their life. Or there's been other stories where people are injured. I got involved with this work because I'm the father of a child with autism. He is a great little guy. Every once in a while, he can get into a real fight or flight panic mode. And it's very difficult to calm him down. And one of my greatest worries is that someday someone, a coach, a teacher, a neighbor, someone calls to get him help, and there isn't one of these mental health services available and he's hurt in some way. So I do this work because I want, as he gets older, for these services to be available for people like him and for people all across our city and county. So we have this program that is in a pilot right now. And it was designed to be a 5-year pilot and be citywide and comprehensive at the end of those 5 years. However, just a year in, we're hearing that they might cut its budget and it might no longer exist. So we have been advocating all year with the mayor and with the city council, but now we're at a point in our advocacy where we need you all to make some noise, right? We need everyone on this call to hop onto the action toolkit we're going to share in a little bit, send some emails, share our graphics to social media. There's an opportunity to go in person on Friday to make calls. But to give you a little idea of why we're doing this right now, right now it's March, and in April, the budget comes out. So the final decisions being made by the mayor, by city council, by all the mayor's support staff, like in the city administrative office, they're deciding right now what gets cut and what survives. And they've told the news that they're $1 billion in deficit from last year's budget. So they have to find a way to cut $1 billion out of a $13 billion budget. And we're worried that our program, which is one of the newer programs to be added to the pile of the budget, could be one of those things cut. And so we're reaching out to these key decision makers, Mayor Karen Bass, the city administrative office, which are the people who prepare the budget. They look through all the programs and figure out what everything costs. and all that. The members of the Unarmed Crisis Response Ad Hoc Committee, these are the people who are planning out the Unarmed Crisis Response programs for the city, as well as the members of the Budget Committee. And there's some overlap here. Councilmember Angelenos Hernandez and Councilmember Blumenfield in CD1 and CD3 respectively serve on both of these committees. So we're targeting essentially these 10 people and their offices to try to save this program. Just so you know what's going to happen next, the next couple days, we're going to be sending out emails, starting this big campaign. We're doing this now because that gives us almost a month, a little under a month, until the mayor releases her final budget proposal. That's going to be on April 21st. On April 21st, around noon, we're all going to get, if you're into this stuff, you're going to get a notification because you signed up for it, that the 500-page budget has been released. If you're a nerd like me, you're going to go in there, you're going to Control F, and you're going to find UMCR and see if it's been budgeted or not, or look for other important programs to you. That night, we're going to meet on Zoom to review and re-strategize, figure out what we need to do next. If the mayor does not give any money to this program, if the program doesn't have it, it doesn't mean it's dead at that point. We can still fight to get the council to add it back in. So that means that we're going to be going to in-person comment on April 25th. We're going to be submitting more emails and letters and things all throughout the month of April and May. And then May 16th through 20th, the council reviews the budget committee report and they make their last changes. And then May 22nd, they finalize their action on the budget. They send it to the mayor. And then by June, the budget's finalized. So right now in this period from what's today, March 25th through June, is our window of opportunity to make sure this program gets funded. So let me make sure I didn't go too far. Yeah, all right. Strategic actions you can take. You can click this, you can scan this QR code, or you can go to laforward.org/saveumcr, which I'm sure one of my colleagues will put into the chat right now. And then I'm actually going to show you something. If I can just do this. How do I get out of here? Stop share. All right. I want to show you something here. If you go to that link, it's going to take you to this page on our LA Forward website, where there are 4 actions that you can take. Action number 1, send a one-click email. This is going to bring up your email browser with all of those addresses filled in, and it's going to have an email already filled in the box, but you need to go in that email, and where there's a blank space, you need to put in your name, your neighborhood. You don't need to know your city council office. If you just put in your neighborhood, like North Hollywood, Silver Lake, whatever it might be, that's good enough. And then at the bottom, there's another blank for you to sign your name. That'll let you send the email off to the 10 people. LA Forward will also get a copy so that we can track how many emails have been sent. And then we're going to ask you to go step 2, open up our toolkit. There's more information in our toolkit about how you can go make public comment on Friday. There's information there. There's all the graphics you can share online, as well as a, let's see, I can show you. In the toolkit here, there's like sample text for what you can post in your caption online. There's all sorts of cool stuff in there. So you can use this toolkit to help you do the advocacy. And then finally, let's see if we can go back to this. And then you can also, we're going to be going on Friday in person to Van Nuys Town Hall to make public comment. If you've never made public comment before, it's really cool. You go in, you sign up, you get 1 minute to speak. We're going to have little cards there with talking points to help you out. A bunch of us will be there to help you out as well. And this is going to be the first time the ad hoc committee on unarmed crisis response meets. And they're going to be hearing a report about this UMCR program and how it's operated through the first year. So we might get a bunch of new information and data about how it's been operating. So that's a bunch of different ways you can help. We're really happy that you're here and that you're taking the time to do this. I'm going to bring this up in just a moment, but I want to then also share with you real quick how you can stay involved. Next week, we're going to bring people back and we're going to report back on how this advocacy has gone. If we've gotten any responses from council offices, what we learned at the Friday meeting at City Hall. We're going to report back on all that stuff and to discuss next steps, things we can do throughout the month of April. Also, we meet every Monday at 7 p.m. So if in the future you want to go to this website down here and sign up, you'll get our weekly emails that sort of explain what we're doing, what we're working on that night. And hopefully you can start attending our regular Monday meetings if you want to stay more involved with this work, because even if we save this program this year, we still have to do the next 3 years to try to get it expanded citywide and to fix all the problems with dispatch and. So like, this is just the beginning of our work, not in any way near the end. So thank you very much. I'm going to go back real quick just so we can, if anybody needs to see this or write down these websites or anything, they can. But I believe for now, I'm going to throw it over to Godfrey and Danielle for Q&A.
I think it is Christy.
Oh, Christy, yes.
Hello. So my name is Christy, live in Venice. My pronouns are she, hers. And I'm just going to go over a couple of the questions that were in the chat. If anyone has any additional questions, now's the time to throw them in the chat and we'll answer them to the best of our ability.
And actually, before we start with questions, Christy, we could
Sure.
stop recording. I know that some of the things that folks may want to ask